3.3 Atrocity crimes. 40. This sustained situation of illegality and with impunity, with its associated violations of international law and international crimes, has predictably given rise to further egregious violations, amounting to atrocity crimes committed since October 2023. These have in turn precipitated the opening by the ICJ and ICC of proceedings concerning Israel, the former relating to genocide, the latter to war crimes and crimes against humanity. 41. On 26 January 2024, following the South Africa versus Israel proceedings under the Genocide Convention, the ICJ ordered Israel to take all measures within its power to prevent genocidal acts against Palestinians, and in May 2024, the court ordered Israel to immediately halt military operations that may bring about conditions of life intended to destroy. In separate proceedings, Nicaragua versus Germany, the ICJ reminded all states of their international obligations relating to the transfer of arms to parties to an armed conflict in order to avoid the risk that such arms might be used to violate international law. 42. By placing states on explicit notice of this risk of genocide, the ICJ orders engaged the obligation under Article 1 of the Genocide Convention to prevent and punish genocide, thereby exposing all those who continue to aid, abet, or assist Israel in committing such acts to potential international responsibility for complicity in genocide. 43. In November 2024, the ICC issued arrest warrants in the situation in the state of Palestine for Israel Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu and former Defense Minister Yoav Gallant on the basis that there are reasonable grounds to believe that they bear criminal responsibility for war crimes and crimes against humanity. 3.4 Consequences for corporate entities. 44. The above legal developments have significantly reshaped the assessment of corporate responsibility and potential liability, which must now be interpreted in light of these orders and decisions of international courts. 45. The scale and severity of violations occurring throughout Israel's decades-long military occupation, which has helped entrench a settler colonial apartheid regime, should already have alerted corporate actors to their responsibility to avoid causing, contributing to, or being directly linked to ongoing human rights violations, and the possibility that they may have been complicit in the commission of international crimes, such as by aiding and abetting and facilitating them. The political economy of Israel's occupation set out in the report is illustrative of the entwinement of all manner of corporate activities with the displacement and replacement of Palestinians in the OPT. At a minimum, this directly linked these corporate activities with an entrenched and structural set of violations that almost certainly already triggered the responsibility of corporate entities to cease engagement linked to the OPT and the UNGPs on the basis of their limited capacity to wield influence in order to prevent or mitigate the adverse impact. But the recent and ongoing ICJ and ICC proceedings have removed any possible doubt and put corporate entities, whether subsidiaries, parent companies, or direct actors and investors, clearly on notice of the serious risk of being implicated in very serious violations of international law, including human rights violations and international crimes, and of their actions having contributed to or become criminally complicit in these violations and crimes. 46. Israel's ongoing illegal occupation of the OPT creates an untenable situation for corporate entities to simply continue business as usual. The finding that the occupation is per se illegal and that international crimes, including genocide and arguably the crime of aggression, may have been committed, has gone far beyond a heightened risk of adverse human rights impact. The private sector must, in its own interest, urgently reconsider all engagement connected to Israel's economy of occupation and now genocide. 47. A consequence of the ICJ advisory opinion is a requirement for heightened human rights due diligence on the part of corporate entities, which must now address the fundamental illegality at the heart of Israel's enterprise. They can no longer limit their legal assessments and mitigation measures to questions of Israel's specific conduct and whether certain human rights, e.g., environmental, workers' or children's rights, or lack of fair trial guarantees, and humanitarian frameworks are respected. For example, the incarceration of thousands of Palestinians, whether in administrative detention or after being convicted in military courts, is unlawful due to the lack of legal authority and because it is part of a governance system using mass incarceration of Palestinians as a tool of systemic repression and forced displacement, and not merely due to the absence of fair trial guarantees. The advisory opinion also signals that corporate entities must recognize the primacy of the right to self-determination and its interpretive function in the construction of all other human rights protections. This means human rights policies and environmental, social, and governance frameworks cannot continue to overlook the right to self-determination, which is firmly embedded within human rights law, recognized as a foundational right of all peoples and the prerequisite to all other rights. 48. It also means recognizing that any engagement with the Palestinian people and in the OPT must comply with their right to self-determination. This supersedes paternalistic justifications based on the fiduciary obligations of the occupying power under the Fourth Geneva Convention and invalidates specious justifications by corporate entities, such as that an investment through Israel as the occupier can eventually benefit the Palestinians as well, or that disinvestment or divestment would have adverse human rights impacts. 49. The ICJ advisory opinion endorsed by the UN General Assembly imposes a prima facie responsibility on corporate entities to not engage and or to withdraw totally and unconditionally from any dealings with any component of the occupation. Where corporate entities disregard this notice, fail to abide by the responsibilities under the UNGPs, and continuous engagement through their activities and relationships with Israel, its economy, its military and private sector connected to the OPT, they knowingly contribute to or cause violations, including the denial of the Palestinian right of self-determination, the permanent annexation of Palestinian territory, or the maintenance of Israel's unlawful occupation of Palestinian territory. The escalation in legal responsibility arises also because ongoing sustainment of any relationships and activities in such a serious context contributes to legitimating Israeli conduct and furthering impunity, which in turn leads to ever more egregious conduct. Normalization of the illegal is essential to the survival of Israel's settler colonial enterprise. 50. Now, this is a political economy that was always eliminatory and has turned into genocidal mode. Confirming this, the ICJ provisional measures and ICC arrest warrants signal the risk that corporate entities and their executives that engage in the OPT are implicated in serious international crimes. Any decision to continue engagement in Israel's economy is therefore done with the knowledge of the crimes that may be taking place and of the fact that they may provide material support to Israel to continue to commit those crimes. 51. Corporate entities and their executives can and indeed must find themselves liable in civil or criminal law for such conduct, in addition to the multitude of other crimes and human rights violations that are part of the economy of occupation. The actions entities and executives do or don't take in accordance with their responsibilities vis-à-vis these legal developments and the UNGPs have material relevance to key evidential questions that would arise in the course of determining their civil and or criminal liability.